We are live! Woohoo! Yay! So excited. Okay, everybody, it is Christy Nichol from the Blissed Out Formula, and I am so excited because we have a very special guest with us today. So let me introduce her without further ado. So Dr. Heidi Petak is a Dove Award-winning writer, communication consultant, and founder of Speak Eagle Communication Strategies. She holds a PhD in communication from Regent University, and she trains leaders and organizations and everyday people like you and I how to become strategic communicators for good. She is the co-founder of Heart Perception Project, an effort to help Americans learn to connect across the political divide. She joins us today from Colorado Springs, where she lives with her husband, 4 boys, dog, and one-eyed cat. So welcome. I'm so grateful to have you here today, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for asking me, Christy.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And we're going to be diving in today how to communicate in challenging situations so that you can feel heard and understood. And I just know that this is really an extraordinary skill set that we actually need to learn. We're not necessarily born with, and can really improve the quality of our relationships and our sensation of feeling less burnt out by being able to speak our minds in a powerful way. So I'm going to just dive in and share with all of you exactly how we came to meet and how it is that we're here today. So here's how it goes down. Not that long ago, I had a circumstance where I was in a challenging situation, and I have all the tools and resources at my disposal, but I was at a point in this process where I was stuck. And I literally had to go on Google and write down, Googled how to communicate when you are angry. So that's really what I typed in the search box, because I was like,
perfect.
I had to have this conversation. I knew it was a crucial conversation. And I really was at a point where I was actually feeling angry in the situation. And so I had to figure out how to get myself into a better place so I could have a useful and powerful conversation and preserve everybody's self-esteem and all of this. So I Googled, and there you popped up in YouTube, this amazing video on how to speak Eagle and how to communicate when you're angry. And what you really helped me to do is identify the 3 different types of communication styles that can get us into trouble. And the one thing we really need to tap into in order to have a powerful and connected conversation.
Good.
And if you would be so willing, I love your dog. That's awesome. If you would be so willing.
Oh, she busted through my door.
Oh, that's awesome. I would love for you to share a little bit more about those communication styles and let me know when I can share that visual as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, years ago, I started just wondering what it is that triggers people and how the trust can dissolve so quickly in a relationship, especially in my own heart. Like, what are the things that make me go, I'm not going to share anything with you ever because you just really hurt me or broke my trust. And as I started to investigate this, I thought, what if we put 2 continuums that cross? So the first one is assertiveness, an assertiveness continuum that goes from passive to aggressive. And then the other continuum is a trust and fear continuum. Because I thought, I wonder how much trust plays into how healthy or unhealthy we are communicating with other people. What are the strategies that we choose to use? And so this trust fear became a super, super big thing that I wanted to look at. So you can go ahead and put that up on the screen so they can see what it looks like. So if we cross these 2 continuums, we come up with some different communication styles that result from it. So on the fear side, we have three communication styles that result from being passive or being passive aggressive or being aggressive. You can see those on the bottom. If you are afraid and you are naturally passive, you're probably going to be a turtle. That's what I am naturally. And it means we hide our head. We don't want to say what we're actually thinking and feeling because we're so afraid of offending somebody and them rejecting us or cutting us off. So we just don't share it. The fox is the one right in the middle, and that's passive aggressive. That is someone who's both afraid and they don't want to be too passive. They don't want to be too aggressive because they don't want to say anything at all, but they don't want to say too much. So they use their facial expressions and body language and actions and things like that to say what they're actually thinking and feeling. And that's a fox. And I think we can all feel it when somebody is being passive aggressive with us. And we're like, gee, I don't know if I trust that. Because often it comes with a pretty heavy dose of a guilt trip or shame or something like that that goes along with it. On the aggressive end, we have the bulldog, and that's somebody who's afraid and they are naturally very aggressive with the way they communicate. And usually these kinds of people say, I don't have time to make my communication fluffy. I just want to say it the way it is. And I don't know that they realize that in the process, they bite other people's heads off. And people like me who are a turtle were like, that's scary. And I don't know, bulldogs make me scared, but bulldogs, if you look at it, underneath it for them is they are afraid too. And I would say that the bulldog is afraid of the loss of control. The fox is afraid of vulnerability, and the turtle is afraid of being rejected. So we have all these things that are these fears that go on underneath these three unhealthy communication styles. So then we asked, do you have any questions about that first, Christy?
I just want to recap that because that was really powerful. And so there are these three communication styles that all inherently come from a place of fear.
Yeah.
Each one has its own vulnerability. So the turtle, the one that stays quiet and doesn't say anything, has an underlying fear of being rejected if they were to speak their mind. The fox has an underlying fear of being vulnerable.
Yeah, which really leads to rejection. If you're too vulnerable, then somebody's going to go, oh, that's how you really feel. It is revealing weakness, which could definitely lead to somebody rejecting you. So yeah, I think the turtle and the fox are both very afraid of rejection. Okay.
And so the fox shows it in a way of physically showing signs of you should know, or you should get what I'm giving you the vibe of, but I'm not actually going to say it.
Right.
And then the bulldog has a fear of loss of control, I think you said. And so in that fear of loss of control, they just come with a bit of a bite.
Right.
In the way they deliver their message.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we could sum up their fears by saying they're all afraid of experiencing shame. Because if you think about how rejection feels, it feels like shame. And if you think about being vulnerable with somebody, that's super scary because somebody could shame you for that vulnerability. And if you think about the loss of control, what that feels like shame too. Oh my goodness, I have no control here. So all three of them, I would say they have in common that they're afraid of experiencing shame. And I think that's for every one of us. That's probably one of our biggest fears that ends up compelling us to speak in really unhealthy ways to each other.
Okay, I got it. And so we have these three communication styles that are on a continuum, none of which are particularly effective.
They're not because they end up sabotaging what you really want. For the turtle, if you don't ever say what you think and feel, I've experienced this for myself, that no one totally knows you. And what you want is an intimate relationship. You want that closeness, you want that acceptance. But if nobody really knows you because you're not telling them and you're not risking it, then you don't ever get the intimacy that you wanted in the first place, that you were so afraid of losing. You never actually get it. And for the fox, I would say that's the same for the fox. They want connection, but in being passive aggressive, they sabotage the connection that they really want. And the bulldog, I mean, I would say we all want connection. The bulldog wants connection too. And maybe even that control that they want to make sure that they're controlling the connection in some way. They sabotage that, because if they are too aggressive, then somebody is not going to want to have a relationship with them. So then they sabotage that ability to influence or that connection that they could have had. So with all of it, we sabotage ourselves.
I love how you have just sort of made this less bad or wrong. Just these are just three ways we may operate, and we probably lend ourselves more to one versus another. They're not good, bad, or wrong, but they're just not particularly useful.
They're not effective, right? Yeah.
And so how do we cross the divide from the fear to the trust to the strategic eagle?
So the reason I chose the eagle for this is a number of different things. One of the cool things about eagles is they have really powerful vision. Like their vision is, I'm trying to remember the percentage. It's like, 75% better than our vision, that they're able to see colors 10 times better than we do. They can see way, way further than we do. And in that, I think so often with these fear-based styles, we're being really short-sighted. Like they might be effective to get what we want in the short run because the turtle wants acceptance in the short run, and they probably get that by being quiet. And the fox is able to probably use the guilt trip and get their way in the short run. And the bulldog is able to get you to do what they want you to do in the short run because you're scared of them. But in the long run, those relationships are not going to be healthy relationships because we've broken apart the trust that we could have built. So I love the eagle because I feel like that vision is a picture of us having a long range goal of having a healthy relationship 50 years from now, rather than 7 minutes from now, me getting what I want. So I love that about the eagle. I also love that the eagle is able to soar above storms. They actually use the power of the wind. And you have all these other little birds that are like flapping their wings like crazy to try to keep flying. And the eagles, they're smart. They use the power of the wind to fly. And in my mind, that is a parallel for how an eagle is able to navigate conflict in a healthy way and not be afraid of it, but be able to walk into conflict in healthy ways. Some of the things that I think are super important about the eagle are to recognize when we are afraid. And like what you talked about, Christy, when you were super angry, one of the things that I share in that particular video is anger is a secondary emotion. And that means there's a primary emotion underneath it that is driving that anger. And to figure out what it is underneath there, like what are we afraid of? Or what's that fear of shame underneath there? Like, am I lonely? Am I afraid of shame? Am I, what is this that's going on underneath? And so often, if we can choose to share that underneath emotion rather than the rah anger emotion, people can receive that a lot better. I mean, can you imagine how different it would be if someone came to you and said, I really, I missed you. I missed you tonight at dinner, instead of saying, where were you and how come you were late and when did you show up? There must be something else that's more important to you than me. And you know what I mean? Like that just shuts us down. But if someone came to us and they were like, I just missed you. I like it when you're with me. Oh my goodness. That would change everything, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it has a much more melting energy to it than a combative energy. It's like, oh yeah, gosh, I'm sorry I wasn't here. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I
So instead of I need to defend myself because you are shaming me.
Yes. Yes.
There's also the power of the curious question. I think I have been, I mean, it's absolutely transformed the way I communicate. And so when I am angry or when I'm starting to feel shame, I have a theory about the hot potato. You can put my hot potato picture up. I have this theory of the hot potato that when we are feeling shame, it feels like a hot potato in our hands and we don't want to hold it. So we want to throw it at somebody else and get rid of it as fast as we can. So we throw that potato at the other person and they catch that potato and they're like, this hurts. I don't want the potato. So for instance, if you showed up late to something and somebody said, where were you? How come you were late? Why were you late? Then that's them holding a hot potato, because I would say it's compelled by shame in the first place, because the shame of somebody being late to meet with you, there's maybe something deeper under there that makes you go, how come I'm not worth somebody showing up on time? So you're holding it to begin with. They throw it at you for being late and you're like, I don't want this. I'm going to throw it back at you and be like, well, if you understood what the traffic was like out there, then you wouldn't accuse me of, So then it just keeps going back and forth. And I would say I have a funny phrase that says eagles can't play hot potato. I mean, picture how silly that would look for an eagle to play hot potato. They don't. And so for us, what does it look like for us to just set it down and ask a curious question instead? Like you could ask a question like, so how are you processing this? What are you feeling right now? I can tell by your body language that you're really upset. Help me understand that. What is this like for you? What has this been like for you? And not be afraid then of what they share with you in return, even though it might trigger you again and you're going to want to throw the potato at them again. Just choose to set it down and ask a curious question instead. I've even thought about, I was thinking about today how there's all these conflicts over loading the dishwasher.
Yes, tell us more.
Like when somebody else is loading the dishwasher, then you're like, why are you loading it like that? Do you see how much space you have left? And no, you can't run it yet. It's not full. Like I have this all the time at my house because I have a certain way I like to load the dishwasher. But I realize the reason why it triggers me is because I have this scarcity mentality. I don't want to waste anything. Yeah. And I don't want to run a dishwasher that's not full because that's wasting water. And what if someday we don't have any water at all because we've wasted too much? You know what I mean? So that's like that feeling of shame that comes with the idea of wasting something. So I'm holding it to begin with, and I need to recognize that. And then instead of throwing it at the other person, I could say, which would be like, why are you loading the dishwasher like that? Which is just going to make them go, why are you such a perfectionist? And then it goes back and forth. Yeah. Then the other person, then I could say instead, like, so talk to me about your dishwashing loading strategy. And then it could be funny. And then I could be vulnerable and say, yeah, so I've got this thing with wasting water and it just really triggers me. Do you think you could put the bowls on this side so it leaves room for the plates over here?
And so doing, I can hear and sense like it does create that sense of connection. And I have experienced that. If I can share a very quick story of that same idea, that I feel like we're asking the curious question of the tell me more.
Yeah,
came in of we have a kitchen and we were talking and all of a sudden we're in this conversation that was. In my mind, I was like, this was going to be a $60,000 reno. Like, you know what I mean? Like, as I was listening to what was wrong. But when I asked the curious question of, tell me more, it actually turned out like those little Lazy Susan things that goes around. Like, if they were just painted a new black color, everything would be fine. It would look it would look newer or updated or not as old. So it's like, wow, we just saved ourselves $60,000 by discovering through Tell Me More. It's actually just that little thing that's I don't know, $10 paint job.
That's amazing. That's really cool, Christy. And, I think there's great skill in learning how to ask a good, curious question, because our knee-jerk reaction is going to be to ask a loaded question, which usually starts with the word why. Like, why did you do that? What were you thinking? Well, that's a what, but it's essentially saying, why are you so stupid? That's all those why questions I think are loaded. And that's like, if we're not strategizing, we're going to ask a why question. But if we can stop for a second and go, okay, what's a curious question? I got the why question in my head, like, why did you do that? But I think, okay, what's a curious question I can ask instead of a why question? And I've used it. I was in a phone call with somebody and it was getting really heated. And the question in my mind was, why did you do that? Or why didn't you do that? And instead I stopped and I said, so what were the factors do you think that influenced you to make that choice? And I realized that takes a lot of work to try to form a question like that, but it is so worth it because you could see like brain chemistry. I could hear it on the phone that it almost went from like your primitive limbic system, which is your fight, flight, or freeze, to his prefrontal cortex, which is where we process information and make good decisions. We strategize here. I could hear it when I asked the what question, like, what were those factors? It went to his prefrontal cortex and he was like, well, let me think. It was this, and it was this, and it was this. And we had a really cool conversation. And we took it from being like crazy heated, like, oh my goodness, one of us are going to hang up in each other, back down to, all right, let's process this instead of just attacking each other.
Okay. So can you recap for us then 3 simple, curious questions that someone could grab?
Yeah.
Wanting to do this, that just could be like, as soon as they hear themselves wanting to ask the why, if they could just stop themselves for a second, or even 1 or 2 curious questions they could start with to get practice at?
So one of my favorite ones is starting with help me understand. So help me understand the background behind this. And then there could be a follow-up with, what was maybe something in your past that contributed to you deciding what you did or believing what you do about this. I really like to observe another person's body language, especially like to say, I can tell by your body, this is really tense for you. Tell me what's going on. Another one I use a lot is, how are you processing this? How are you processing this? What are you feeling? What is underneath that? I know I've given you way more than 3 curious questions, but like what were the things that led to you believing what you do about this?
So let's say if it's more of that first question,
help me understand.
Help me understand, because even if we could leave our audience with just 1 phrase,
yeah,
to get them started, especially, I think there's different levels of relationships. There's more intimate relationships. There's coworkers and colleagues and like the whole spectrum, right? So if they could perhaps start with help me understand as like their go-to phrase for the next 30 days, every time they feel themselves wanting to ask a why question.
I love that.
So I'm going to challenge everyone who watches this replay or is watching us live. If in the next 30 days you catch yourself wanting to ask what were you thinking? Or why did you do that? If you could press the pause button and instead say, help me understand. And then what's the next couple words they could
help me understand what it was about this that upset you, or help me understand what I just did right then that seemed to set you off? Help me understand what is good. Help me
What? Okay.
understand what it is about this or what it was about that.
So for example, I think we're going to get into a little bit of a role play in a second to help our viewers, and maybe we'll be able to ask that question because I can see how that could come in to help. So we have the 3 communications. I'm just going to recap for everyone. Our 3 communication styles that are based out of fear. So we have our turtle, our fox, and our bulldog.
Mm-hmm.
And learning to recognize that underneath each one of those is a fear and a vulnerability.
Yes.
Especially the fear of being rejected or the fear of losing control.
Mm-hmm.
And then to communicate more powerfully and effectively, we want to get up above like the eagle soaring with all that amazing sight. Put down the hot potato.
Yeah.
Instead of passing it back and forth, like I love how you said, how ridiculous would that be if the eagle was carrying a hot potato?
You just have to remind yourself when you're holding it, eagles don't play hot potato. I'm going to set it down.
And so we set down the potato and then we ask, help me understand what, and then we go from there to build trust and connection versus separation and
Right. And then it makes it a learning conversation because I probably don't understand all of the things that are going on in the other person for them to respond the way that they did or make the choice that they did.
So I just love, I feel relief just having like a specific phrase to use. I know that's so helpful for anybody to have something to shift into when they recognize where they are in that conversation.
Yes.
Anything else you want to share with us before we maybe dive into a small little role play of
so I think I'll talk through let me talk through the SOAR model, and then people will be able to see how I'm using that in my conversation with you. So I love tangible, give me the steps to help me know, especially with difficult conversations, because I've always been terrified of them. But if I can have a plan walking into a difficult conversation, then I think it's not quite as scary for me, because I already said that I'm a turtle and I hate difficult conversations because I'm so terrified of the shame of being rejected. So I really want a plan. So given this metaphor of the eagle, these are the steps that we can take as an eagle in a difficult conversation. So the very first thing before you soar is to assess the situation. And the thing I always want to stress at the beginning is that your safety is of utmost importance. And if you feel like you're unsafe at all, bring someone else in to that conversation with you. Make sure you're in a public place if you need to be. Don't put yourself at risk by having this conversation with someone who could end up hurting you in some way. So before you soar, assess the situation. The S on SOAR is to start with value. And that means I find something that I value about the other person. It may be related to the thing that I need to talk to them about. What do I value about the person? And sometimes it can be, if they really are ticking you off, it can be really hard to find that thing, but dig deep and you can even just appreciate their sometimes for me, it can be someone who's really passionate about what they feel, and they've scared me because of how because maybe they're a bulldog. And with a bulldog, I could say, I so appreciate your passion. I can tell that you absolutely are committed to what you do. And I appreciate that. So start with value. The O is to offer your story. That means state your observations. What are you seeing and feeling and hearing, and what have you seen? Those observations need to be done in a way that doesn't feel accusing. It feels more like you're leading toward that curious question, like I'm seeing this, and then move pretty quickly to that first curious question, which is the A, ask curious questions, to say, so I've been noticing this. Help me understand what it is that's going on here. That's your curious question. And then the R is to respond with empathy. Whatever they tell you, you're going to say, I can see how you would feel that way. Respond with empathy, because even though you might not be able to identify with the exact circumstance, our emotions are universal, and most likely you can identify with the emotion that they are probably experiencing. Now, you'll probably have to go back and do some of those. You'll have to restate some value. You might ask another curious question. So these aren't necessarily just step by step and the conversation is over after empathy, but you might have to go back and do some of those steps again. And then at the end, you decide, how can we partner together to move forward? Like, let's be a solution team. We are coming up with a way that we can move forward together. So these are our steps.
Okay, so start with value, something about that person that you value, even if it's just their passion.
Right.
Offer your story of what you observe is going on, and quickly move into the help me to understand.
Yes.
That, so you don't stay stuck in story.
Right.
And then based on what they say, respond with empathy, because there's a universal emotion that you could at least relate to, even if you don't fully understand how they think or why they think it. Is that, am I on the right track there?
You got it. You're a good recapper.
I love to recap. And I love that you gave us that part about speaking to the passion, because I can, like, let's just be real for a second. Like, if someone is in that situation and you are feeling angry, there could be a part of you that wants to dig your heels in and not want to see the value.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Like, that's a normal, healthy, well, not healthy, but a normal human.
Yes. Yes.
Healthy. And so by giving us something that's, you don't have to go to the deepest level of like vulnerability and value right off the get-go, but just find something that's really useful.
Yeah. And if it is an intimate relationship, you could start with it off with, I love you. And that's why I want to have this conversation with you. I had to have a really hard conversation with a super close friend of mine. And I had just come out of teaching at a conference on how to have difficult conversations. And I was using someone else's material that said, start at a different place. And when I walked into her house to have this conversation, I immediately started crying because I didn't want to have the conversation. It was so scary for me. And I started with, I love you. And I love you so much. And you're one of my dearest friends in the whole world. And that's why this is so important to me. And I have to tell you this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't do anything that I said in the conference. I started with value and I walked away. I was like, I know the first step. You have to start with value. It just little comes naturally out of you in those difficult conversations.
Yes. And preserves integrity and self-esteem for everybody.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
I love that. So you've given us so much value here. First, you've given us a way to think of, I love the animals, like just giving us a way to think about the styles of communication that are less effective and come from fear. You've given us that overview of the eagle and where we want to move to that creates trust. You've given us a model for how to have that conversation as an eagle, how to soar. And what, in your experience, because one of the reasons we're having this conversation at all, especially in the burnt out to blissed out model, in burnout, one of the number one contributors to burnout is unexpressed emotions or unarticulated emotions. So emotions unarticulated and unexpressed living in the body lead and create burnout.
Yeah.
Right. And can show up as physical illness, fatigue, tired, exhaustion, and all of that. And it could just be that we don't have the skills to communicate in a powerful, effective way. So as a turtle or the fox, we're stuffing it. And then it's ending up creating burnout in the body.
Well, and turtles become snapping turtles. They don't stay quiet little turtles for long, because at some point you reached your breaking point.
Totally. And so you're giving us such powerful tools to prevent that and to practice with, so that we do our best, not get it perfect, but also not stuff those emotions so that they end up contributing to dis-ease in our own bodies. Love that. I know I want to be mindful of people's time, but if we can try our short role play just to demo,
Yeah, sure.
Still feel up for that.
So if you can remember the SOAR model, SOAR, I'm going to use those steps, and I am going to pretend that I'm a boss or a supervisor, and I have to go to Christy and tell her that, the story is that someone has come to me and said that she is communicating with them and they are feeling criticized by her. And I want to let her know that that's not okay. You can't, it's hurting it's hurting the morale on your team. So I'm going to have to let her know that. So you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Do we start or do I?
I'll start. Okay. Hey, Christy, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Good. I appreciate you so much. I can tell that you really value excellence, and I love that. I think we need 100 more of you on our team that value excellence the way you do. So thank you for always wanting to be excellent at what you do, and I know you want other people to be excellent as well.
Yeah, I do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So you know that I am your biggest fan, and that's why I'm having this conversation with you, because I want to coach you and I want to help you win for sure. So one of the things that I've noticed is your relationship and some of your interactions between you and Jennifer. Tell me about that. Like, what is that relationship like for you?
Well, oh gosh. I just feel as though she's not doing things as effectively as she could. Maybe I feel like she's not taking care of clients in the way that I would, and maybe they're not feeling like they're just not getting what they're meant to be getting out of that situation. And I don't know. I just don't know that I feel like she cares enough.
And help me understand what that does in you in feeling like she doesn't care enough. How are you processing that? Like, how does that make you feel?
Well, it's just that I want to make sure that our clients feel really valued. And that's really important to me. And I don't want to lose clients because they're not feeling valued.
I love that. I love that you value your clients feeling valued. I think that is super cool. And that is something I think that we want. We all want that, definitely. I totally empathize with that for you. And I value that as well. So one of the things that I've been observing is that there are ways that we can come alongside somebody and maybe coach them in a different way to value the clients the way that, for you to maybe coach Jennifer to value the clients the way that you do. And so I wondered if you might want to meet with me separately and I can help you with some of that coaching. Like, I want you and I to be partners in this and to figure out what's a way that you can be an even better leader in what you do and be a good role model in being able to model this. And also to hear from Jennifer's point of view. I'd really like for you to be able to hear from Jennifer's point of view, how she's feeling, what she's thinking. So what would you think of that if you and I meet together and we just have some solution sessions?
Yeah, I would totally be into that.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Christy. I think that, I love that I can see your love for our clients in you, and that's really important to me too. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. So I totally, first of all, felt valued right
Good.
off the get-go, which allowed me to feel less defensive. It helped me to articulate what was the actual issue underneath what might have been looked at as a critical, being critical of this other person. And then I got the impression that you wanted to help build that for all. Like, oh, okay, like this is important here in this organization, and that I value that and you value that, and we're going to find a way to bring that value forward.
Right. And to hear from Jennifer's point of view, because as a supervisor, I would never want to talk bad about her behind her back to you. But I would say it's so important to communicate that we are all on the same team. And I think so often these type of conversations end up feeling like I'm on one side of the desk, you're on the other side of the desk, and we are not on the same team. And I am not your biggest fan. So even physically, I would go sit next to you or be like in way closer proximity to you than being on the other side of the desk. Not during COVID, but
yes.
But I think sitting next to each other says we're on the same team and we're going to figure this out together. Not you did this wrong, I'm going to accuse you and you got to defend yourself. I would also want to help you figure out what's underneath that, because I think that you were afraid of the shame of a client not feeling valued.
Yeah.
And that's the hot potato again, because when you're afraid of shame, then you're going to throw it at Jennifer and you're going to say, you're doing this wrong. And then she's going to throw it right back at you. So if we can just set the shame down on the table and be like, okay, I have no control over what Jennifer chooses to do and how she chooses to communicate with them. So I have to figure out a different way to influence the situation.
Totally. And by creating that connection through trust and vulnerability, then therefore solutions can come forward that are useful.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So cool. Oh my gosh. So you've shared really powerful, you've shared powerful strategies with us, frameworks, model. I think everybody from today can at least look for opportunities to ask, help me understand.
Good.
And everyone has a phrase and a something that they can actually use that's practical in the moment. Yes. If they can't get those words out of their mouth, they can at least look for noticing themselves wanting to say, what were you thinking? Right. So something else, start there and just notice yourself wanting to say that. Even if you can't solve it yet for yourself, you can at least notice. Then you can hopefully take the next step of asking to help me understand. And it may be maybe in really difficult situations, if you're in one now or one's coming, you have no choice. You might have to use this SOAR model, but also to look for opportunities to try it in less charged situations. Maybe. Yes. So you can just start practicing, like providing or saying the value, getting the story a little bit, help me understand, and then responding with empathy. So it's like you could practice this in ways where it feels less charged, so that in a charged situations, you might do okay with this. Yes, that's right. And if you noticed me when I was doing the SOAR steps, I stumbled all over my words trying to figure out how in the world to say it to you. And I think that's just supernatural. It's supernatural. Give yourself grace in that process. You're probably not going to say it perfect. You're probably going to stumble all over your words, and that's okay. It's a process, and relationships are dynamic. They happen in real time. You're not going to have time to rehearse the fire out of this before you walk into it. And so just give yourself grace and experiment with it. Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Thank you. You're so welcome. I really appreciate you and appreciate your expertise and willingness to share it with all of us. And for offering such practical tools and strategies. It's wonderful. Well, I appreciate what you do, because there's a whole lot of people that are burned out in their jobs. And if you can take them from burned out to blissed out, that's a fantastic goal. So awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I know that I feel like I've gained lots of really powerful, useful information, and I trust that everyone else has. If anyone has comments or questions, to go ahead and pop it. Most of you watch the replay, so just go ahead and pop it in, and I'm sure Heidi, you will be, if we tag you, be happy to just pop a comment back.
Yeah, sure. Be happy to.
And then also that you have a free gift available as a course on is it Udemy or Udemy? How do I pronounce that?
I've always said Udemy.
Udemy. Okay, so it's on Udemy.
Like Academy, but it's Udemy.
Okay, so I'm going to put the link in the post below. So you can go and grab that it's free for the next 3 days. And it's specifically around how to have difficult conversations to help people cross the political divide. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I mean, trying to get my dog out.
Well, we did see how you live with your 4 boys, dog, and cat.
She wants to be a part of it too. As long as the one-eyed cat isn't in here somewhere. Yeah. So it's yes, how to have a healthy conversation about politics, which, oh my goodness, that is something that we all need right now for sure. Those conversations come up at dinners with family members and relatives and all kinds of things. So you can take advantage of that freebie. You'll give them the code.
I'll give them the code, yeah, and I'll pop that all in the comments just after we wrap up here. So Thank you so much for your time. I really
You're so welcome.
Here. And I'm going to go ahead and end our broadcast here and say goodbye to everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye. Thank you, Christy.